Welcome back to the channel, my name is Lanza, and today we'll be breaking down episode 4 of Hell's Paradise. If you're new to the channel, then allow me to explain the layout of this video. First, I'll provide a brief summary of my major points of the episode. Second, I'll break down the content of the episode and provide my thoughts. Thirdly, we'll take a look at audience reception and gauge overall opinion on this week's episode. If this is your first time here, then welcome. Consider subscribing for more episode breakdowns and video essays. If you're a returning watcher, then remember to leave a like. Those are greatly appreciated. Without further ado, let's begin with an episode summary of Hell's Paradise, Episode 4. The episode begins with a flashback to the crime that Tamiya Gantetsusai committed that landed him in a spot in the expedition. In anger, he had cut down a Lord's Dragon symbol after being told that he could never really kill a dragon. Returning back to the present, we meet Yamada Asemon Fuchi, a shorter executioner who has been paired with Tamiya and holds a fascination over the anatomy of the human body. As the two venture deeper into the island, they are attacked by island giants. We cut back to Gabimaru and Sagiri, who are also surrounded by island giants. Returning back to his killer instincts, Gabimaru easily holds off the majority of their attacks. They eventually run into another group comprised of 3 people: Yuzuriha, Yamada Asemon Senta, and Yamada Asemon Genji. After explaining the chaos of the island and its mysteries, the two cells form a group out of necessity. As they continue forward, Sagiri collapses. We then cut to another group, Aza Chobe and Aza Toma, a criminal and executioner who had been in cahoots before the island. The two brothers easily cut down remaining island giants that attack them as they venture into the island with the purpose of finding the elixir of life for their own immortality. The episode ends there. Episode 4 begins to unravel the mysterious nature of the island. The most glaring question is the existence of these god-like monsters who roam the island with religious items. As stated by Yamada Asemon Senta, the designs of the architecture and monsters are a strange reflection of some Buddhist-Taoist hybrid, which opens up even more questions to the audience. Have we found some sort of origin of religion? Are they merely superficial as someone's twisted perspective on religion? The giant monsters lend another clue to the religious themes of the island. At this point, we really don't know if they're self-aware, but we know that they can speak. The messages they relate to their listeners are even more jarring, stating, "Murder is a sin." The monsters also state that insects and fish also have independent lives who shouldn't be harmed. An interesting point to acknowledge is that these words are being said towards Chobe, an individual who has no qualms on killing and rejects the shackles of society's rules. From this interaction, we can safely assume that the island giants act as island guardians from outsiders who don't respect their rules, the rule of not harming life. The island guardians may also be fervent followers of some sort of polytheistic religion on the island, as seen from their religious items. However, we can recall episode 3 where Gabimaru states that the island's makeup is unnatural. There's no rhyme or reason to the island's plant life. One could assume that the island's soil is unique to cultivate a broad range of plant life, or that there's a degree of artificial cultivation going on. But for that to occur, you'd need to know someone was behind it. While on the topic of this episode introducing new concepts that will later be expanded upon, we were witnesses to Gabimaru's Nimpo aesthetic blaze. But it's during his massacre of island guardians that he almost allowed Sagiri to be killed. Gabimaru emotionally felt inclined to protect Sagiri, even though it would ultimately leave him exposed to the island guardians. We see this strange perspective where Gabimaru is rushing to attack the island guardian, but now its body is only shown as a silhouette instead of the actual appearance. The fight ends quickly, but I think that the animators did an excellent job in giving us crumbs for the eventual power system we are to learn for later. This episode has also introduced to us 3 new Yamada Asemon. Yamada Asemon Fuchi views life with an objective lens. His role in the clan is to understand the anatomy of the human body, a task he enjoys completing since he understands the role it plays for the betterment of his clan in a monetary angle. We haven't seen his interactions with Tamiya yet, but it's an interesting pair to say the least. While Fuchi is more straightforward with his work, Tamiya is pretty much unhinged, so much so that the reason he's a criminal is because he vandalized a lord's gate. But this really makes you wonder whether these criminals are unjustly incarcerated. Gabimaru was attempting to leave the village with his wife, but was betrayed and subsequently arrested. Tamiya was arrested for slashing down a lord's property. Chobe is guilty of his sins from his father. From what we've seen is that these criminals aren't inherently bad people, but maybe victims of an overly litigious society. Compassion plays a role with these characters as we reflect on the Yamada Asemon executioners, individuals who hold no compassion, no emotion in their strikes. We can go up higher into the hierarchy and realize the shogun's orders are ludicrous. He is not just sending the criminals, but also the executioners to their death. all because he wants to see the elixir obtained. He is so hell-bent on obtaining this item that he has considered sending another group of talented individuals to the island to keep pressure, such as the ninja arriving from Gabimaru's village. Unjust incarceration and a belief of duty over emotion is heavily hanging over the characters as they continue on forward into the island. While Gabimaru is continuing his onslaught against the island guardians, Sagiri is overcome with shock. Realistically speaking, the craziest thing the Yamada Asemon executioners have probably seen is a prisoner who could stretch his body parts. At least, what we know of, there have not been any major demons or supernatural entities in this world so far. At best, you could argue that the recovery of one body from the island's expedition that was eventually corrupted by the plant life is the most shocking thing they've seen. The Asemon have never dealt with these types of enemies. Humans are their bread and butter, but now their enemies could have multiple necks or, hell, even no heads at all. I really like how the Asemon are reacting to the island's different death traps, as it shows that they are also similarly boned. As stated by Yuzuriha, these island guardians aren't even the most dangerous thing. Instead, it's the insects that carry venomous stingers that transform an individual into a plant. In fact, they are so dangerous that their scales give off poison which can incapacitate and make an individual hallucinate. Come to think of it, Sagiri was literally surrounded by dozens of these butterflies wafting around some particles in the air. This episode also shows the unreliable nature of Yuzuriha as a character. From the first interaction she's had on the island, she's already started to lie frequently. She's a skilled kunoichi who takes advantage of her beguiling appearance to gain favors. It's through her skills that she's able to find out so much information on the island's insect life and provide the hint that the butterfly scales have poison. But this tendency of being a pathological liar is never really good for a team, even more so considering the nature of their situation. In particular, you probably don't want to be with someone who might just betray you in the end. Sagiri and Gabimaru have already built a stable bridge to form a trusted relationship, while Yuzuriha could be an unreliable till the very end. She is self-serving, where her end goal is to simply not die young on the island. There's no need for a sappy, heartfelt story such as, "My little sister got kidnapped." No, it's quite hedonistic and intriguing when we take a look at the Island Guardians. The Island Guardians promulgate that murder is a sin. Does Yuzuriha also represent the sin of selfishness that would prompt the Island Guardians to attack her? That being said, seeing as how Gabimaru appears to be the strongest of the team, there's no real reason to be worried if she does eventually turn on anyone. The team of 3 executioners and 2 criminals has formed a sturdy structure, as we have individuals capable of bringing the firepower to the enemies, and individuals who can analyze the enemy to understand their nature, all brains and brawn. This dynamic isn't really shared with one particular pair of individuals that have landed on the island and is fighting for their lives, Chobe and Toma. One of the beautiful points about Hell's Paradise is the role of multiple characters, meaning that if a specific group of individuals just doesn't resonate with you, you can always bounce off to another pair who you're probably more inclined to see. At this specific point in the story, Gabimaru and Sagiri can be grating when they continue to repeat the same push and pull relationship of to kill or not to kill and feeling guilt when killing. Chobe is the hammer that breaks this monotonous dance, as he doesn't really give a shit when it comes to killing. His act of killing has always been an act of self-preservation, not just for him, but for his younger brother as well. Chobe cares deeply for his younger brother, as he was forced to look over him upon his mother's death and father's execution. We get a cruel fake-out where we think Chobe is leaving behind Toma, but comes back to protect him with an even bigger sword. It's pent-up rage against society's back-breaking rules of guilt and crime that's irrelevant towards him. He just doesn't care, and just wants to live like a free man. In many ways, he's not even human, he seems more like a wild beast. His younger brother Toma is almost the polar opposite of his brother in terms of personality. Toma, while lacking the fervent behavior of a wild animal, makes up for it through a docile appearance. His cunning nature makes him as twisted as his older brother and goes to show how these 2 brothers have been forced to adapt to the world around them. That is why he takes no notice of society's laws. He has no rules that can change his mind, and more importantly, it is why he wants to obtain the elixir of life. By obtaining the elixir of life, he will have been freed from the world's greatest law, the cycle of life and death. Thomas says something while they're fighting off the island guardians that gives us a clue to the mysterious nature of the island. When they hear that murder is a sin, Toma comes to consider these island guardians like deities. When you consider all of the factors we've talked about, it wouldn't be much of a reach to consider this. These island guardians walk around with religious items, prayer beads and spout the gospel to heretics who break their religious code like Chobe. In some way, we could consider these deities to be gods, albeit very weak gods who can be killed by man. It's a subtle line that will also grow in importance, but I do believe that the interaction these two brothers have really highlighted the episode for me. Also, Chobe's voice actor did an amazing job. That extra moxie that Chobe has in the manga really came to life here. Now let's take a look at some comments to see how this week's episode of Hell's Paradise has been received by the public. Comment number 1 states this: Rie Takahashi is insanely charismatic. What a performance. Funnily enough, when she was begging Gabimaru so that she could join, I felt like I had heard that cutesy inflection somewhere else. Rie Takahashi was also the voice actress for Ai Hoshino in Oshino Ko. It's pretty crazy considering the range of her voice actress. I mean, really, if you take a listen to Tomo-chan as a girl, you'd be amazed at the range she has that can go from overtly bubbly to a husky, rough voice to a sadistic ninja. These fan favorite characters have definitely earned their spot now that their role is elevated with these good voice acting. Comment number 2 states this: That was pretty much the 4th episode of character introduction and backstories. I hope we finally get something more interesting next week. The problem with having such a large cast of characters is that you need to make us care about them in some way. You can see it with Chobe and Toma, where their backstory was critical to understanding their twisted view of the world. The fortunate thing is that after receiving a backstory, that character won't have to recall their past anymore. At this point, we've covered almost all the criminals, but unfortunately I have to tell you that we still have a portion of Asemon who still have yet to be completed. I know that isn't reassuring to hear, especially if you're bored of all the talking and backstories, but it has to be this way. The reason it has to is because there are no other story arcs in this series. It's all just one long expedition discovering the mysteries of the island. The best thing we can hope for is to finish wrapping up all the characters in the beginning so that we may focus on the actual conflict of the story at the midway point. Comment number 3 states this: She continues to disappoint after such a strong first episode, but with this much focus on her uselessness, I hope it means they're setting her up for a chance to shine in the future. The first episode does lend a degree of unreliableness to Sagiri. If you take Sagiri at face value in the first episode, you're getting a case of whiplash by seeing her act in the second, third, and now 4th episode. But there's more to her than meets the eye. The first episode never really gave us the inner voice of Sagiri. We mainly took the perspective of Gabimaru and his struggle to keep living for his wife. Even then, Sagiri has had trouble with executing people. In the case of Gabimaru, she was never really trying to kill him in the first episode. It might sound a bit off considering she almost cut his neck off, but she was also carrying the note from the Shogun to pardon Gabimaru if he would partake in the island's expedition. Afterwards, when reaching the island, we've been more open to her inner thoughts, and yeah, she's freaking out like anyone else would. In the manga, Sagiri is freaking out because she was unable to use any of the skills she has learned throughout her life in trying to beat the island inhabitants. Basically meaning that her skills are pretty useless. And she's right. She couldn't fend off any of the insects roaming around here. It is right before she passes out that we get a shot of Yuzuriha stating once again that the scales of the insects emit poison, meaning that an audience viewer will know that it was the poison that caused her to faint. I think the anime is still capable of explaining that the poison knocked her out, but it takes more attention to detail, meaning if you don't know why she passed out, you probably weren't paying attention. We see Sagiri surrounded by the particle spores as the butterflies dance around her in the anime. This is coupled with the fact that Yuzuriha literally says that the scales emit poison and hallucinogens earlier in the episode. The anime does not retell us the information, so many people are speculating why Sagiri passed out. Was it maybe due to literally her stressing out that she's incompetent? And the answer is no. It's just the poison. That's it. It's right there. I think I've said all I could about this episode. So far, going across in the internet, it's been pretty positive. I agree with this sentiment and I'm excited for the next episode. The only real negative I have towards the series at the moment with this adaptation, or really more of my problems are just towards the actual manga, which just the anime is really, how else do you think they can work around it? You know what I mean? Anyway, thanks for listening to the video, and I hope we'll get to see each other next week. Take care.